Well, a lot has changed since we've last spoken. Hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. And we are obviously have so much to say about Nick Saban, the positive coronavirus test, what this means for the game upcoming on Saturday. A lot of this is opinion and conjecture. There's a couple of assumptions I'm going to make off the top, and I'll kind of explain that here in a moment. Obviously, our prayers go out to Saban as he fights for a speedy recovery. I do think he'll be missed in Saturday's game, and I'll say more about that over the course of our show today, too. We'll talk to Terrence Edwards. I mean, one of the things that we're going to have to try to deal with over the course of the next couple of days is, and this may sound like an overly simplistic question, but how important is a head coach on game day? I mean, you can make a case that it's huge. We've already seen a little bit of a movement in the point spread, not even a little bit, a pretty significant movement in the point spread because of Saban's absence. But what does a head coach really to what extent does he truly matter on game day? We'll talk to a lot of former players over the course of the next couple of days about all of that. So what do you say we get it started? DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Let me say a couple of things off the top here before we get into what is obviously the news of the day and really the news of the year in so many respects. Nick Saban testing positive for the coronavirus. First of all, on a personal note here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, we send prayers out to Coach Saban. We wish him a speedy recovery. Our hope is that he remains symptom-free, as that he has said that he is, and I've got enough respect for him to say that his presence will be missed on the sideline on Saturday. He is obviously a worthy adversary. His presence in a game like this just makes the game bigger. I think Georgia fans were looking forward to the test of going up against Coach Saban, seeing the Dogs do that. So him not being there on Saturday will be noticeable. And, of course, we don't have any hesitation about saying that we are right there thinking about him, praying for him, and hoping that he gets better soon. The other thing that you got to say here is it is my assumption that the game is still going to be played. Now, obviously, we don't know what and it's really the more relevant side is Alabama right now, what their coronavirus test situation is, especially given what is also being reported to be going on at Ole Miss right now. But my assumption, until I'm told otherwise, is that the game is still going to be played. First of all, it's entirely possible that Saban and Greg Byrne who's the Alabama athletic director, it's entirely possible they contracted the coronavirus but did not give it to any of the Alabama players. That's entirely possible. The other assumption I'm going to make here is that Alabama still wants to play this game. This is not one of those things in which I believe Alabama is looking for an excuse not to play just because Saban's not there. They're looking for a reason to avoid playing this. I don't get the sense that's what's going to come out of Tuscaloosa. Now, listen, I've been wrong before. Maybe I end up being wrong about this, but my assumption for right now and the way we're going to approach today's show is that the game is still played on Saturday. And by the way, if it is played, even though Alabama did not have its head coach, there'll be a lot of programs who might be looking for a way to get out of this game. If Alabama still chooses to play on Saturday, still moves forward with this game, absent Nick Saban, then to a certain extent, they have to be given some credit for doing the right thing from a competitive standpoint, the right thing from a public morale standpoint, right? College football matters to our morale. This game at 8 o'clock on CBS on Saturday night is a very big deal. If Alabama still participates, absent Nick Saban, to a certain extent, you got to, you can't shake hands right now because of the obvious problems, but you got to tip your hat, wave the hand, whatever else to say, hey, thanks guys for, keeping up your end of the bargain here, even minus your head coach. So you got to sort of say that all off the top, and we're going to treat the game right now as if it's going to happen. Let me let you hear from Nick Saban. This is him announcing to the world that, yes, he does have the coronavirus, although he seems to be in pretty good spirits. Here's Coach Saban.
Yeah, well, you guys know that something really must be bad wrong. As much as I look forward to these Wednesday press conferences, for me not to be there with you today. But I was informed early this afternoon that I had a positive test for COVID-19 on a PCR test. At this point, I'm completely asymptomatic, feel fine. Our medical officials have told me as long as I remain asymptomatic, I will have a daily PCR testing per SEC protocol to confirm the initial positive.
So obviously I'm an idiot when it comes to stuff like this. You shouldn't really even listen to anything that I'm saying. But the reason why I think that he's emphasizing the notion of the PCR test is because the antigen test, the ones that are really rapid return, those have a tendency to turn up more false positives. I believe the PCR test, less so. So I believe that's why You hear Saban emphasizing the PCR test there as opposed to the other antigen tests that sometimes kind of get, have been talked about here a lot more recently. I think that's from Nick Saban. The next sort of phase of all this is, well, he's got the coronavirus. He's not going to be able to be on the sidelines on Saturday. But, early in the evening yesterday when this was first starting to come to light, there was all the discussion of, well, can you have any involvement in the game at all? This is what Saban said on that at the time.
Obviously, Sark has been a head coach before. I'm not sure exactly how this is going to play out in terms of when the game comes, whether I can have communication with people or not. So we'll have to research and sort of figure that one out. But we did have a plan for each coach on the staff as to what might happen. And we just got to go from there. Just like if we lose a player, we have to do the same thing.
The Sark that he references is Alabama offensive coordinator Steve Sarkisian. He's been a head coach before, USC and Washington. So this is a guy that has head coaching experience. He will act as the sort of acting coach on Saturday. Saban at the time wasn't aware of the rules governing a coach's involvement sort of outside the field of play, but the AL.com and other websites have done some good reporting on this. Let me read to you from AL.com here for a moment. This is Rule 14-11-B, and this was interpreted by Steve Shaw, who used to be SEC Director of Officials. I think he does that job now for the entirety of the NCAA. He works for the NCAA now. And so this is Shaw saying that Rule 14-11-B is very specific and allows only voice communications between the press box and the team area. Therefore, A, the coach could not call into the press box or the sideline for anything related to coaching purposes. This, Shaw would go on to say and explain in AL.com, extends from the period 90 minutes before the game to 90 minutes after the game, which is the span of time in which the officials are thought to have control of the game. That's kind of your game window, 90 minutes before to 90 minutes after. AL.com doing some good reporting on that. Let me give you a ludicrously hot take here on kind of a relatively benign subject for a moment. I think any contact with Nick Saban outside the field of play from his home or wherever he'd be watching the game into anyone who's currently coaching the game at Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday, I believe that would be akin to cheating. I think that when you look at the current modern landscape that we're in, think about Major League Baseball with the Houston Astros and rumors of other Major League teams who were involved in, alleged sign-stealing scandals. I guess in the case of the Astros, that's not even alleged anymore. Think about Bill Belichick, New England Patriots. Think about the way in which college football teams, the coaches, are so on guard about having any information slip out at all heading into the upcoming week. I think that we should assume that the attempt to get information about someone else's sideline, someone else's signals, someone else's what you might think of as sort of secret information that only players and coaches on the other team would know, the attempt to gain that information is just part of the strategic atmosphere around big-time sports. We should all assume that. And a coach working outside the stadium, I would say, would have an easier chance of gaining access to that. Now, all these programs have analysts and stuff like that anyway, but a coach who's not in the stadium environment, not on the sideline coaching, who's not in that sort of controlled atmosphere, would just have an easier time accessing that and processing that if it came in. So Nick Saban, if he's not going to be on the sideline and coaching, as the rule states, and I think there's a good reason for this, should be able to have no contact with anybody else on the sidelines at all. To give you a very simplistic analogy here for a moment, you cannot use a cell phone at a blackjack table, and there is a reason for that. So it's the same thing in coaching there as well. Someone outside the stadium environment should not be able to have any kind of contact with anyone within the stadium environment working as a coach on the sideline or a coach in the booth. The rule is obviously in pretty bold print there. I think it exists for a reason. So on Saturday, there should be no contact for Saban with anybody else in the stadium atmosphere. I think that would be essentially akin to an unfair advantage. But let me also say this for a moment. This is sort of a direct message to Georgia fans here because I understand the frustration about this, and I've even sort of felt some of this myself. If you only knew what we initially had planned for this game this Saturday. We have taken hundreds and hundreds of people on these road trips before. We have really been a major contributor to some of the so-called DawgNation invasions where Georgia fans have taken over opposing stadiums. I'm really proud of the impact us here at DawgNation have made on some of that kind of stuff. And you better believe, in an old world, a million years ago, we looked at this game and said, oh my gosh, we'll take 1,000 people, go have a huge tailgate and have a great time. And obviously, That was made impossible by the nature of the coronavirus. And it seems like, as you get closer and closer to this game, all of a sudden everything just sort of feels just a little bit smaller. At first it was reduced capacity at the stadium. Now it's Nick Saban not even coaching. It's Alabama fans saying, well, you may beat us, but it doesn't count. There are only 25,000 people in the stadium. Nick Saban's not there. Kirby Smart may win. He probably should win. That's what the Alabama fan would say. He probably should win. But if you do, it still doesn't count as a loss for Nick Saban. It still doesn't count as a Saban dropping a game to one of his former assistants. Here's what I'll say in response to all of that. We're going to talk more about this throughout the show. I think one of the most important skills you can develop in life is the skill not to care what anybody else thinks about anything. Georgia fans should not have their feelings on this game on Saturday dictated by how Alabama fans are going to attempt to define it. They're going to have their agenda about what they want this game to mean, and obviously they are going to try to diminish the results of it for fear they might lose to Kirby Smart and Georgia. But a Georgia fan has the obligation to say, I simply don't care what you think about this. And you say it wouldn't be a head-to-head win for Kirby Smart against Alabama. But frankly, Georgia fans can define this however they want to. They can create their own narrative, and they shouldn't spend 5 seconds worrying about what anybody from Alabama says about any of this coming up on Saturday. Because here's the thing you should understand. For the Georgia fan who's frustrated that, my team's not going to get credit if we win this game on Saturday, you should know this. The opposing fans, the Alabama fans, anybody else, they're never going to give you credit no matter what Georgia does. And if we were really honest here for a moment, let's just be very, very candid. Half the time, we don't give them any credit either. How many times on this show have you heard me sort of dismiss Clemson because it only plays in the ACC? Or act like the Alabama dynasty is this close to cracking and this close, to crumbling every single day? I believe those things when I say them, but the truth is, if you're a Bama fan or a Clemson fan, you probably look at the bubble of DawgNation and saying, well, they never give us credit either. So the Alabama people are not going to give you credit. But you know what? If there were 90-something thousand people in the stadium, if Nick Saban was there and Georgia won, they'd still find a way not to give you any credit for the win. So you can't worry about this. I think the game's going to be played on Saturday. I think that Georgia has a good chance of winning. Thought that before the Saban news. Maybe it's more likely that Georgia wins now. But either way, it's up to Georgia fans to define this for themselves. What the game means for the Dogs, what it means going forward the rest of the season, and all the noise of what a Bama fan may say about all of this. Frankly, that's just that. It's noise that ought to be ignored. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Merriweather and Tharp, and great to have you with us. No matter how you get to us, a lot of video, a lot of podcast options. Obviously posting the show every day at the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really glad to have you here. And big thanks to our friends at Merriweather and Tharp for making it all possible. They're your source for Georgia divorce. And listen, expertise in any field is always valuable. But when it comes to a field like the field of divorce and being an advocate for those going through divorce, that may be one of the, most valuable forms of advocacy you can ever have because of the fact that it is a scary situation. And I'm always going to be very thankful and impressed with people who make scary situations, at least what seems like a scary situation, more easily navigated, providing peace of mind for people that are going through stressful situations. That's just an incredibly generous gift to society, and that's what Merriweather and Tharp provides. So you can reach out and find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's theatlantadivorceteam.com. You can have an initial consultation with them. I have heard from people in our audience who've said, listen, I'm not sure I want to go through with this yet. I'm not sure I want to do this. And Merriweather and Tharp has just sort of walked them through the process, has encouraged them actually to find a way to save the relationship if it can be saved. But if it's one of those situations where, hey, things have become untenable, then Merriweather and Tharp's there for you. They're ready to fight for you. They're ready to stand alongside you. They are your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. All right, it's Terrence Edwards here coming up in a moment. We'll ask Terrence directly, what does it mean for the head coach of Georgia's opponent on Saturday not to be there for that game? How valuable is Saban's presence? A former player will help give us some thoughts on that here coming up in just a minute. Before that, it's Around the Doghouse here today, delivered by our friends at Marco's Pizza. And obviously, Georgia players reacting to the news of what happened with Saban yesterday. Georgia wide receiver Kearis Jackson, who in addition to being one of the real breakout stars for this team on the field, has also been a very articulate spokesman for this team off the field. And he addressed yesterday how the Dogs confront the news that Nick Saban won't be there on Saturday, and I think that Georgia fans should follow the lead of the Georgia player Jackson here. Listen to Kearis.
I don't have any concern with Coach Saban testing positive. I'm more so worried about us as a team and how we're going to be prepared to go play a huge game, prime time game. We just have to we have to be prepared to be able to execute. and just have to focus on what Georgia has to do.
I think Kearis Jackson's 100% right there. There is still a job for Georgia to do. And I said this before about Alabama fans using this news to construct a narrative that somehow the game means less. Therefore, it's almost like if you're a Bama fan, you treat this as a can't lose situation. You either diminish a potential Georgia win or you celebrate an Alabama win that came through adverse circumstances. Many Bama fans feel like they can't lose here in this scenario. I think for Alabama itself, teams are always looking to seek some form of adversity during a season. Alabama can spin that this way of, hey, we got something we got to try to overcome right now. We've got to play for Coach Saban, all that kind of stuff. But for Georgia, the job is still the same. This is a team trying to come together with a new quarterback, with a new offensive coordinator. This is a team trying to go and get a win on the road and, frankly, just go to 4-0. Kirby Smart always talked about the importance of the next game. This is one of those moments where I think that really rings true, and I love the perspective that Kearis Jackson provides. And Jackson also shed some light on the fact that in the midst of all of this, it's still a reminder that off the field, in relationship to the virus, these Dogs players have a job to do as well, and Kearis talked about that.
I pretty much say, we have no problems on the team or whatnot, and guys have been doing the right thing because we know that this season means everything to us. So we're doing everything the right way, just making sure we're wearing our masks, social distance.
So listen, I don't think you can discount that part of that. And Kirby Smart, when he spoke about this kind of stuff, has been very clear on this too. He said as recently as Monday, we're always just one positive test away from some bad stuff happening in terms of not being able to stay on track for the full 10-game season as it's currently scheduled. And it seems like the Georgia players themselves are taking that seriously. The news through 3 weeks has been really good, and there's no guarantee it continues to be that way. But don't discount the work the Georgia players are doing both to make sure they can play games like this on Saturday and to simply not be distracted by the Nick Saban news one way or another. It's Around the Doghouse. It's delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza, America's most beloved pizza, because it's real, authentic pizza made the Italian way. And in a time we're thinking about the coronavirus, think about the ways in which Marco's Pizza gives you peace of mind with the way they provide the pizza to you. 450-degree oven that it's cooked in, and after that, it's contactless, it's touchless. They simply slide it right into the box. No one touches your pizza at all. It comes straight to you. You can order on the Marco's app or marcos.com, and we're really thankful for the way in which Marco's Pizza is providing great pizza to us right now in a very healthy and safe way. Good job by the folks there, marcos.com or the Marco's app for more information about that. Okay, so it's a huge day around here. The Nick Saban news obviously rocks everybody to the core. We're still operating on the assumption the game is going to be played, and we're trying to figure out what it's going to look like with the head coach of the other team not there on the sidelines on Saturday. So here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, let's do more of that right now. Let's welcome in Terrence Edwards.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to Terrence Edwards here. We'll, of course, see him on Saturday as part of our DawgNation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore, and we're lucky to get a chance to talk to him right now. And, Terrence, first of all, thank you so much for being back in the program again. And this is one of those moments in which I'm glad to have a former player on the show because you've interacted with coaches on the sideline. Not every coach is the same. Some are, I believe, more active on game day than others, and maybe Saban at this stage of his career is less active than he used to be. But upon hearing the news that Nick Saban won't be coaching from the sidelines on Saturday, is this a huge deal? Alabama made way worse. Is this the kind of thing that for one game, or at least this game on Saturday, the Alabama assistants can step in and kind of help fill the void? How big do you think the Saban absence will be on Saturday?
I think it's going to be big. That's a voice. That's a huge voice in that locker room. And we all know and understand what type of coach Nick Saban is. And now for the first time in I don't know how many years, his voice won't be heard on game day. The way of coaching won't be coached on game day. So those players are going to have to adjust to someone making decisions, and they may make the same decision, but Nick is a legend for a reason.
And so if you're a Georgia player, we just heard from Kearis Jackson a moment ago on the show, but if you're a Georgia player, you've also got distractions to block out now, right? And you've got Alabama fans who say the game essentially doesn't count because Nick Saban's not coaching in it. You've got a lot of other people saying, well, with the Florida LSU game being postponed and, reports coming out of Ole Miss that maybe the cracks are starting to show in terms of the SEC's attempt to play a season, that's a potential distraction. But if you're Georgia, you've still got to go out there and do your job on Saturday, right? And find some way to kind of block out all this noise. And for Georgia, it is the next game. It's a chance to go 4-0. It's a chance to stay on pace with all of these season goals intact. Once again, as a former player yourself and a guy who works with current players, how does Georgia maintain that focus with so much noise on the periphery right now?
Your leaders in the locker room has to step up and make sure the younger guys understand. You can only control what you can control. That is the way you prepare for this game, the way you go out and play, the way you study, the way you treat your body. So all that other stuff is things that are out of your control. So we need not to really listen to it. So I think Coach Smart and the leaders in that team is really going to keep those younger guys focused. Like, this is a big test. We haven't beat Alabama in years and haven't beat them in like 10 of the last games. So we have to go and play. It doesn't matter if Nick Saban's there or not. It doesn't matter if they count the season in 3 weeks. This is the next game, and we have to win this game to keep our goals intact.
So let me talk about Georgia here for a moment, kind of away from the Nick Saban coronavirus news. I think one of the huge storylines for Saturday is we've seen the Alabama offense be really high-powered. We've also seen their defense be quite suspect. They're giving up around 30 points a game. Georgia, on the other hand, great defensively, and I would say right now, Terrence, they're good offensively. I don't know they've quite played at a great level yet, at the highest possible level yet, but I think they've been good. When you evaluate what you saw against Tennessee, when you evaluate what you saw against Auburn, if we assume this is an Alabama game similar to the way that we originally thought it was going to be, how ready do you think Georgia is for the task at hand on Saturday?
I think those guys will come in ready to play. I think they understand the magnitude of this game and who they're playing against. Let's just face it. Alabama has been a big dog on the block, and the last few times that we played them, realistically, we should have won those games. I think we gave those games away, all games to win, and Alabama took it from us. So I think these guys, like the Richards, who's played in those last two games, really going to let these guys understand that, we can beat them, but we have to finish these games to get on their level.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I want to talk to you about Stetson Bennett's role in all of this in a moment. Before that, let me remind you, of course, Terrence Edwards here with us on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Thrive Today. Also be with us on Saturday for our DawgNation postgame show, presented by the UGA Bookstore. We're partnering with the UGA Bookstore for the 5th consecutive year for our postgame show. That means being there for home games on Saturday. This Saturday, though, in Tuscaloosa, but late at night. And, Terrence, I hope you'll be coffeeed up and ready to go for that late broadcast. We'll be there for you after the game against Alabama on Saturday. Terrence's analysis on this postgame show has been outstanding thus far this season. I know it's going to be great on Saturday as well. And, of course, for those of you who may be home gating yourself this weekend heading towards that Alabama game, don't forget, you still want to be decked out in that UGA gear. The UGA Bookstore, a great choice for all that. In fact, right now, if you can see on the screen for those of you watching on video, this black pullover that I'm wearing is the UGA 10 line from the UGA Bookstore. It's from Peter Millar. The only place you can get that, the UGA 10 version of the Peter Millar pullover here, is at the UGA Bookstore. So make sure you check that out, UGABookstore.com. You can shop anytime right there, or if you're in Athens, stop by and see them right next to the stadium at the UGA Bookstore. Okay, so when it comes to that Alabama test on Saturday, Terrence, Stetson Bennett not playing on the road for the first time, but starting on the road for the first time. He came in relief against Arkansas. We know how that went. It went very well for Stetson Bennett. Now he'll start on the road for the first time. I think, Terrence, there's a lot of good from what you've seen from Bennett, and there's no doubt that Bennett has earned this starting job through the last 2 weeks against both Auburn and Tennessee. There are also some moments in which, there's the almost interception of the ball thrown to George Pickens, or maybe a couple of other opportunities for big plays that didn't quite work out. Stetson Bennett still got some aspects of his game that he's probably working on. What's your evaluation of Bennett going into this game on Saturday?
I think he's played as well as the other guys, the older guys, could have played. I think he's been tremendous. And like you said, it hasn't been flawless, it hasn't been perfect, but he hasn't put his team in position to lose, and that's what you want from your quarterback. He's going out and doing what the coaches is asking him to do, is put the ball in the right spots, make the right decisions, make the decisions quickly, get the ball out your hand, and when it's not there, use your legs to get what you could get. So I think he's played tremendously. I mean, he's led his team and hasn't put his team in harm's way.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. One of the things I agree with you on is if you compare Bennett to what JT Daniels would have done if he played the last couple of games, what Jamie Newman would have done if he was still in this roster playing the last couple of games, my assumption is I don't have any reason to believe you would have seen a much higher level of play from either one of those guys than you've seen from Bennett the last couple of weeks. It has not been perfect. There's room for him to grow. He's about middle of the pack right now in some of those SEC statistics, but Georgia's getting a high level of play from him right now, and I do think he deserves a lot of credit for that. And one of the things, either because of what Bennett has done, has enabled, or this Todd Monken offense kind of brought this about, is the emergence of Kearis Jackson. We heard from Jackson a little earlier on a more serious subject, related to Nick Saban, the coronavirus, and things like that. But we could also spend a lot of time talking about the fact that Jackson's gone over 100 yards receiving the last 2 games. He's already at 300 yards through just 3 games thus far this season. That's a pretty incredible pace to be on, considering the fact that Georgia's only playing a 10-game regular season against all SEC competition this year. I think it's been a breath of fresh air to see how well he has played. As someone who studies the position closely, Terrence, and works with receivers, why has this happened for Kearis? Is this just a better offense for him to play in, or is it something that you think that he's doing that has enabled him to be such a reliable target for Bennett?
I just think it's timing right now. I think he's always had this ability. I've worked with him a few times, and he's a hard worker. I mean, I keep mentioning it, I just have an affinity for those other Georgia guys because I'm one, and he's come from a program in Peach County that just displays, great football players. And I think Peach County I saw Jacquez Green, the famous Florida Gator receivers, also from Peach County, say that's receiver factor. I mean, they have produced so many receivers out of that small town that it is crazy. And he's just the next one in that group. And this has always been in him. Just unfortunately, he's been hurt at the wrong time. Like last year, he broke his hand and had other injuries. He's healthy now, 100% healthy. Now he's finally showing people the talent that he possesses.
I think one of the things we think about when we think about Peach County is kind of a toughness. That's what one of their high school, one of the things that high school is kind of known for is a degree of toughness. And, I think that Jackson plays the receiver position with a great deal of toughness. He's a physical guy there. He's taken some big hits this year, and he's just hopped right back up. He's unafraid to deliver a blow on his own, whether it be as a blocker or, when he has a chance to get a couple more yards by lowering the shoulder. It's kind of interesting to me. This is not some skinny little, receiver out there. This is a guy that's got a little beef to him, and he's not afraid to put that to work out there. I think that probably helps him. Do you agree?
I agree. He does. He's built very well. He's built, more like a running back.
Yeah.
He's 5'10", 5'11", probably 190, but he's put together pretty well. So he's made to take that contact in the middle of the field. He's just tough as nails, and that's what those Peach County Trojans are. They're just tough, hard-nosed football players, and I'm excited for him. Man. I know he came to work with me, and he was excited about this season. And he worked his butt off, and like I say, he asked questions. So he physically and mentally, he was locked in for this season, ready to go, and I'm just happy he's finally getting an opportunity to show everyone his talent.
All right, so let me finish on this topic. In 2002, you became the only receiver in Georgia history to ever have a 1,000-yard receiving season. You were obviously a go-to receiver, and yesterday I had your quarterback, David Green, or one of your quarterbacks, David Green, on the show, and I was talking to him about, so everybody knows you want to get the ball to Terrence because Terrence is having a big year, and yet, clearly to the tune of 1,000 yards, you still found a way to do that. Terrence, right now, there's a discussion amongst some Georgia fans of why isn't Georgia having more success getting the ball to George Pickens? This is a guy that was the MVP of the Sugar Bowl, was clearly a breakout player for Georgia a year ago. We've seen him find the end zone. He's one of a handful of SEC players with more than one touchdown thus far this season through 3 games. But maybe in terms of those big receiving totals, kind of like some of the stuff that Kearis Jackson's been getting, we haven't seen that yet for George Pickens. So as a guy who was also kind of taken away, so to speak, by opposing defenses, how does Georgia still find a way to get the ball to Pickens, even though that's one of the things that opposing defenses are looking to subtract from Georgia's game plan?
Yes, being the number one guy, teams are going to kind of scheme to take you out. And even if that's keeping a guy on top, doubling, any kind of ways, high-lowing him, they're trying to going to take him out. And that read is going to go away from George Pickens now to the next guy. So the emergence of Kearis Jackson, the emergence of Jermaine Burton is going to alleviate some of that coverage. I think that's one thing that helped me out my senior year because I had other guys like Fred Gibson, Damian Gary, Reggie Brown that could take some of the pressure on me, and teams cannot just solely line up and take midway. If they did, they're going to have trouble with Fred on the other side. They're going to have trouble with Damien in the slot. They're going to have trouble at the time with Red in the slot. So Kieris what he's doing, I think, is a byproduct of teams are focusing on George and his own talent as well. So now George is going to have to move George around, get him in spots where you can't double. And when you do double, schematically for defense, there may be some busting coverage because everyone's trying to figure out now who's going to double. You may leave some guys open. So I think they just move him around, put him in different spots where teams are not going to necessarily know he's just going to be the X receiver to the boundary.
And the other thing is, and I know a lot of people disagree with me on this, maybe you do as well, I think you've also got to force it to him sometime, right? I mean, the one thing that Pickens does is he's so daggum strong, and he leaps well. His body control is just one of the best aspects of him as a receiver. You've just got to trust him to go high point that football and pull it down, I think. And, you may have a near interception like you had on Saturday, but with a good defense, you ought to be able to roll the dice every now and then to try to make something big happen offensively. I think that George has got to be willing to force the ball to Pickens every now and then. You can't do it a lot because you can't just be willy-nilly with your possessions. But the reward is, to me, worth the potential risk of occasionally putting it in harm's way if you think Pickens can just go get it. Do you agree with that?
I agree to you to a certain extent. You just got to understand the timing of the game as well. If it's early on in the game and it's still 0-0, you want to try to get him the ball, especially in one-on-one situations. So early on, it's just the timing of the game because you don't want to score. Try to force in the ball and throw an interception when we're driving, and it's a crucial drive. So I agree to an extent where it's early on in the game, and especially when we get one-on-one coverage. Bump the other reads. You got to get him the ball. Yeah. I mean, I know your read may not take him there, but if he's one-on-one, that's your best player. Get him the ball. But it's just a time in the game is where I would say if it's to force or not to force.
Terrence, that's excellent stuff. Great analysis. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. I'll look forward to seeing you on Saturday as well, through the magic of video at least, for our DawgNation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore. Hopefully we're talking about a Georgia win, 4-0 after having traveled to Tuscaloosa. That would be a nice narrative. Appreciate your time here today.
Oh, thank you. Can't wait till Saturday.
All right, good stuff there from Terrence Edwards, the former Georgia wide receiver. We are very, very lucky to have a guy like that. It was David Green yesterday talking quarterback. It's Terrence Edwards here today. It's John Stinchcomb talking offensive lineman. I love nothing more than bringing on these guys who can kind of evaluate the position that they played and tell us what the guys who are playing that position are thinking, and to have a former player say, hey, here's the value of a guy like Nick Saban on the sideline. That's pretty good stuff as well. We've got actually more of that coming on the DawgNation video channels for you today when it comes to the evaluation of Nick Saban on the sideline from a player that played with Saban there. We will do a lot of that coming up. Just very, very briefly on Pickens, let me say this. If you go and watch the 2 touchdowns he scored this season, the one that kind of changed the momentum of the Arkansas game, where he essentially caught the ball in space and then made someone miss just with his elusiveness, his lateral quickness, and found the end zone. And then the touchdown he scores in the Auburn game, where it's the outstretch, essentially showing off his length and his wingspan to pull that football down. That's what he does. Pickens is not going to run past people. He's not Jalen Waddle in that respect. That's one of the reasons why a contested ball, with defender close, most of the time, that's what Pickens is going to have. And much like many NFL receivers, it's the way in which Pickens uses his body that defines him being open. This isn't high school football where he runs 4 steps behind the defensive back who's trying to cover him. This is big boy football where a little bit of an open window is all a quarterback should need to get the ball to him. And so we'll continue to watch that play out as the season progresses.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, so a lot going on with the SEC and coronavirus. We're going to try to deal with all of that here in our SEC Through in just a moment, though. Let me remind you before that, speaking of the DawgNation video channels today, it's the return of the DawgNation Happy Hour poured by Classic City Lager. It'll be John Stinchcomb and me, and we'll have more on the Saban stuff then. This topic is obviously going to dominate the next couple of days leading into the game on Saturday. As I told our audience off the top of the show, I still believe the game is going to be played. I have no reason not to at the moment, But as new news comes out, we'll be covering all of that with you, throughout the day here, including DawgNation Happy Hour poured by Classic City Lager. Now, you may be listening to me right now and saying, B, what is Classic City Lager? This is an Athens original. It comes to us from our friends at Creature Comforts Brewing Company, which is right there in the Snow Tire facility is like right there in downtown Athens. It's a tap room. You can stop by and experience the best that Creature Comforts has to offer. A lot of you know the Tropicalia. A lot of you may have tried Classic City Lager for the first time. When you do try it, here's what you learn. This is an easy drinking beer, a lighter beer, lager-style beer, but it tastes great. It's got a crisp flavor, and the good news is you don't have to be in Athens to get it. You can get it whatever retailer you shop at, available in 6 and 12-pack cans all year long. It's good cold beer. In fact, you can find out more by checking out the hashtag Good Cold Beer. Our buddies at Creature Comforts Brewing Company presenting Classic City Lager. Make sure you check that out today. All right, so here is the latest in all of this. Yesterday on this show, we talked about Florida postponing football activities, and we speculated that this could have a negative impact on the Florida LSU game supposed to be played this Saturday. We now know that it's true. That game has been postponed. It has been pushed to the date, I think December 12th, which is the week before the SEC championship game. So Georgia fans who are wondering, would Florida maintain its bye ahead of the cocktail party? That is indeed the case for now. Florida LSU will be played on December the 12th, leaving the bye on Halloween open before the Georgia-Florida game there on November 7th. There's kind of a lot to be said about this, and there's a lot of criticism right now on Dan Mullen. And listen, I joked about this on Twitter the other day. I'm here for all the Dan Mullen slander. I don't mind, Dan Mullen being kind of picked apart here, but there is this attempt now to rake him over the coals heavily because over the course of the last couple of days, he hasn't quite followed the prevailing orthodoxy as well as people wish that he would. And there's a sense in which, I believe it or not, I actually think some of this is unfair to Mullen. I know that Mullen is kind of being, beaten up a little bit because, he referenced someone getting, I think he said the sniffles. Someone gets a case of the sniffles, essentially referring, it sounded like to many people as downplaying the impact of a positive coronavirus test. Here's what I'm going to say in defense of that. I know even Scott Strickland, the Florida athletic director, kind of tried to walk back some of those statements a little bit. When you are a coach and you are dealing with all these positive tests, I think you're allowed to be frustrated by this. And I think that frustrated people are allowed to have a moment where they don't quite toe the line with their statement quite as much as, some people want them to. I don't think that's a felony, in other words. Should Mullen be publicly belittling the emphasis of these coronavirus positive tests, to the letter of the law? Maybe not quite, but it's not as egregious an error as it's kind of made out to be. It's sort of the same thing about him on the heels of losing the game to Texas A&M, saying he wants 90,000 people in the swamp. As a way of blaming that for the Florida loss, he's obviously kind of a foolish-looking dude right there. To say it's the field, the fans at Kyle Field that changed the game and caused Texas A&M to win, that's obviously ludicrous. But then for people who want to act like, and there's this like superstitious nonsense out there that somehow saying the wrong thing, and I use air quotes around wrong thing, saying the wrong thing about coronavirus somehow makes it more likely that you got the virus, or you have people around you that got the virus because somehow you said the quote wrong thing about the coronavirus. That is superstitious nonsense. These two things are not connected at all. At least in my mind, anyway. So Florida's obviously got a mess. The game against LSU is not taking place on Saturday. Dan Mullen's had to walk back a couple of public statements. I don't mind people beating up on him, but I think some of this kind of stuff has been pretty significantly overblown. There is also what's going on at Ole Miss right now, where positive tests for them have been reported. We are still in the early stages of this news. And, at a certain point in time, it's like, you ever play Clue when you're a kid? Like Colonel Mustard in the like the conservatory with the revolver. It's like you start piecing all these pieces together of, well, so-and-so played this team and so-and-so played that team. What does this mean for team Y? Obviously, you get the Nick Saban news. Ole Miss, who played Alabama last week, is now reporting some of their positive tests here. We don't yet know if this is going to have any impact at all on Ole Miss's scheduled game for Arkansas, but people are obviously watching for that. They're watching to see where this goes, especially given the fact that Vanderbilt, Missouri are not playing this week, LSU, Florida not playing this week, and the Nick Saban news, Ole Miss kind of joining the fray and saying, we've currently got a couple of issues as well. This is obviously going to get some attention. I mean, the one thing I'll remind folks of is that when Major League Baseball first got going, there was all kinds of, issues with that. For a while, the Marlins weren't playing, the Cardinals weren't playing. I think the Cardinals went forever without playing a game, if memory serves on that. Phillies weren't playing for a little while, but eventually it all settled down. I'm still of the belief, as kind of crazy as all this has been here a little bit, that eventually, more than likely, this all kind of settles down. For the most part, I think the SEC is getting this right. The same thing for the NFL, who said to postpone a couple of games, and you've had high-profile quarterback, test positive for the coronavirus, and thankfully, thus far, the people who've tested positive, at least to my knowledge, have, been, when it comes to the extreme symptoms, for the most part, seem to have avoided all of that. That's a continued answer to prayer that we'll continue to seek. But when you look at the SEC's attempt to have a season thus far, what I see is overwhelmingly evidence of something going well. Not perfect, and you got to continue to hope that things go well. And obviously, health and safety, the coaches and the players and everybody involved, continues to be at the forefront here. But I simply reject the notion that this is somehow a failure or in the midst of failing here this weekend. I think that's overblown. This is a scenario to be navigated. It is not a disaster to be endured, and we'll make that your SEC through. And for a couple of minutes here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp today, I want to completely shift gears and talk about something totally different for a moment. Each and every week here on the program, we do our Kroger Fresh Take. Kroger's fresh for everyone. And our Fresh Take here this week focuses on some big news for Georgia yesterday that in a different scenario we would have talked a lot about. But I guess maybe in the midst of all this news, it's also somewhat appropriate to kind of bring this up in the right context. Yesterday was a great day for Georgia recruiting for the class of 2021. Literally, maybe the biggest recruit that Kirby Smart's ever brought in, 6'8", Amarius Mims, incredible offensive tackle in the competition, along with a couple of Bama commits, to be the number one offensive tackle in the country. By the way, if you're watching on video, you see him putting on the commitment chain. I guess there's some rumors here this commitment chain may get passed around here a little bit. If I had a commitment chain, I believe I might wear it every single day on the show. I think I might actually wear that every single day. Now, listen, far be it from me to try to intercept this before it goes to like a Mason Smith or a Corey Foreman, somebody like that. This commitment chain's got a lot of work to do before it's all said and done. But if I could either get, and just to make sure we stay on the right side of, all the compliance issues, maybe it'd be better for me to get a replica, try to acquire a replica commitment chain. But if I could get me one of them commitment chains, I believe I would at the very least hang it somewhere in a prominent place in our studio, if not actually wear it around my neck every single day. If you don't know the commitment chain, you need to check that out at DawgNation.com from our video channels. Really good stuff with Mims yesterday. This was great to see. There was also plenty of social media stuff around this, including Amarius Mims himself, with the announcement that he was committing to Georgia. We'll show you some of this. Good-looking series of photos there. Great edit work. Whoever put that together with him, nice collage of he with his family and Kirby Smart, and a nice prominent picture of him right there in the middle. Massive win for Georgia yesterday, jumping from 14th to 7th the 24/7 Sports Composite team ranking because of all of this yesterday. There was plenty of celebrating as well. I think we have Brock Vandagriff celebrating on this. Vandagriff saying that he's been dreaming about this since we met. Let's work, buddy. And I don't think there's any doubt that Vandagriff here was an instrumental force in all of this, at least it seems. We all think about that truck bed picture. We think about, Mims along with Corey Foreman and Mason Smith and all those guys that Vandagriff was, and along with Lavassier Carroll, another Georgia commit, were kind of involved in kind of bringing together. I also love, by the way, I guess, UGA is fully in bed now with the U.S. Postal Service. Now you got the mailman sets a minute at quarterback. You got a nice little graphic edit here of from Brock Vandagriff to Amarius Mims there. And the priority mail, that's all pretty good work there too. But you love it when these Georgia commits themselves are great recruiters for Georgia. I believe Mims is about to be one of those guys, even though he says his recruitment may remain open. I think he's still going to be involved in the recruiting process for Georgia here. He's closely connected to other big targets, and Brock Vandagriff doing exactly like a big-time quarterback should, involved in a big way on all of this. And I believe that Matt Luke also joined the fray in giving some celebration, saying the Dogs just got better with the Great Wall of Georgia. I think it's quite possible right now that no one is recruiting better for the Dogs than Matt Luke currently is. I think that Luke, in the way in which he held the 2020 class together with the Broderick Joneses and the Tate Ratledges and the Cedric Von Prons, with the way that, you've already had Micah Morris and Dylan Fairchild in the fold, now getting Amarius Mims, the biggest win of all here for the class of 2021. It has been a very, very impressive run here for Matt Luke. It's always a competitive environment to be Georgia's best recruiter among assistant coaches. But for now, it seems fair to say that no one's doing better than the work that Matt Luke is doing. So that's our Kroger Fresh Take here on the program today. And by the way, speaking of our friends at Kroger, don't forget to go to DawgNation.com. The DawgNation Ultimate Fan Contest presented by Kroger is still ongoing there. You can register for your chance to win. All of it's explained about how you submit your entry there at DawgNation.com. But someone's going to be a big winner of a $500 Kroger gift card. Also, we're drawing at random. We've already gotten a lot of submissions for this. We're drawing at random for people to also win one of these cool Kroger-branded DawgNation masks, celebrating some of the great moments in recent DawgNation history. These are well done, really cool stuff. If you want a mask that really stands out from the crowd, this DawgNation Kroger mask is an example of that. It's part of our giveaway here of our DawgNation Ultimate Fan Contest presented by Kroger. So please go to DawgNation.com for more details on that. Also, Gator Hater Updater. They're not playing this week, but the Gator Hater Updater rolls on 1,447 days. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. All right, and on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. A bunch of stuff to talk about with all of you related to today's news and everything else that's going on. John Shaw says on the subject of Marius Mims, not quite a done deal. Yeah, it sounds like the recruitment's going to be ongoing there, but Georgia's going to be still working to keep that win. Barry Watkins wants to talk Steve Sarkisian. So let me just say this real quick. We'll dive into all these comments. R.S. Andrews obviously brings the R.S. Andrews Cool Down to you. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all of that. They take really good care of us around here, and you can find them online at rsandrews.com. And don't forget, later on Friday, the R.S. Andrews Cool Down rolls around for you as well. All the picks for the game this week, including a game that's not going to happen now. We gave you some I thought, pretty salient thoughts on LSU, Florida, knowing at the time it might be postponed, and that is indeed the case there. So you can kind of laugh along as we pre-recorded, made that pick. All right. Matt Talley, kind of a funny Braves tie-in to the situation with Georgia. David Love says the commitment chain should be an approved accessory for DawgNation's official uniform. I love the idea of that. Love the idea of that. Miriam Martin Corbin coming to Tuscaloosa on Saturday. Miriam, I will be there, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you, hopefully. Mike Mazzell says that Matt Luke needs to stay on Amarius Mims so he doesn't change his mind. The truth is that what Mims describes is really basically the way all these recruitments go anyway. Obviously there could be some communication of, hey, we may leave you alone for a little while here because we've got to go work on this guy and that guy and that guy. For the most part, the recruits themselves are okay with that because they want to play with good players themselves. But you can't ever, leave no logs in the fire, or whatever analogy maybe works better. You always have to have, that open line of communication because, recruits still want to feel the love. Even committed recruits want to feel that love now. And that's just part of the process. And Georgia understands that really well. I mean, I knew a guy that was an assistant coach on an SEC team once, and he told me that basically he was told that he needed to try to write 100 handwritten notes a day. That's the level of communication that the program needs to have with all kinds of recruits, future recruits, current commits, everything else. That personal touch, that attempt to maintain those relationships can never stop. And that's one of the things that makes Georgia so good is the fact that they keep that that they keep that up, keep that going. So what Mims described about his current status, he may just give a slightly different voice to that than some recruits do. But the truth is, that's pretty much the way that everybody's handled. Even the guys who say, I'm shutting it down, my recruitment's done. The program still has to show that guy even love. So, I mean, it's really not that different than anything else, I would say. Connor Graham says Mac Jones' stats are better than Tua's through 7 games. How will that change? It's hard to know exactly what all of this means. We've had so much offense in the SEC thus far this year. It could just be that Alabama has played I'm not trying to diminish what Mac Jones has done, but it could be that Missouri and Ole Miss are just really bad defensive teams. I mean, Missouri's given up a lot of points to everybody that's played thus far this year. So it could be that there's a little bit of an exchange rate or a little bit of a stabilization that happens over the course of the season. And for Georgia, whose offensive stats have been good, not great, Maybe that's what they are as a team, or maybe as Georgia gets a chance to play some of these teams that other teams are beating up on, maybe the Georgia offensive stats start to go up a little bit too. So I think it's still way too early to make too many assumptions about all of that just yet. Matt Talley says, yeah, he says he gave a full-fledged zinger, not kind of. Yeah, you're probably right about that. Rob Pennock says that the Dogs need to anticipate a very incentivized Bama team. Yeah, I mean, obviously the main takeaway from today is that you continue to pray for Nick Saban to remain symptom-free and be, healthy. But if we assume that's true, and the overwhelming statistical likelihood is that it will be true, if you assume that's true, teams are always seeking adversity. There's always this attempt to conjure adversity during a season. Give a team something to overcome. Keep them from getting complacent. I mean, Alabama has exactly what it wants right now, assuming that Nick Saban remains healthy. The chance to recast the narrative after the defense got exposed against Ole Miss. The cast to, the opportunity to kind of find some new level of motivation for a Georgia game on Saturday, or moving beyond that. Let's say the Georgia game for Alabama does not go well. Well, it's a chance to regroup, circle the wagons, which sometimes cannot be, necessarily the most awful thing. I mean, we think of Georgia as kind of having that bad game in the middle of the season where things kind of get better after that. Alabama had some of those too for a while. Remember the Arkansas game in 2014 as a for instance on this, when Arkansas won, Alabama beat Arkansas 14-13 or some crazy thing like that, really struggled against a bad Arkansas team. And then after that, kind of flipped the switch, turned the corner, got better. 2015, and they also actually lost to Ole Miss in 2014. 2015 lost to Ole Miss again, got better after that. There's been a little bit of a rallying point for Alabama in certain seasons, and trying to use this as that, it seems certainly possible to me. That's exactly what Alabama's trying to spin this as a source of motivation, a chance to refocus the malaise that led Alabama to have such a bad defensive performance against Ole Miss. They are, trying to get past that, get over that. Also, I think for one game, and really this is the only game that Georgia cares about, I think for one game, the absence of Nick Saban is probably not that big of a deal. If Nick Saban was going to not coach for 5 games, I think you'd probably see this show up a little bit more. But for one game, I think that Nick Saban's absence is probably fairly easy to mitigate against. If I had to guess, we've seen a couple of points movement within the point spread, and that to me seems about right. This isn't a 14-point advantage for Georgia, not having Nick Saban on the field, but it's also not a 0-point advantage either. There are things that Saban might be able to do during a game that won't get done, but it's only worth about a field goal to the final score, which in a very close game maybe could swing the balance of the game, but more likely than not is just one more data point of a lot of things that will either cost or contribute to a Georgia victory. Michael Webb says, can't wait to see how many more truck beds end up in Athens. Brock Vandegrift needs to work on keeping that group together. And then in reference to the Bama fans, Bama fans are going to say what they're going to say, and it's going to be all an attempt to diminish what could be a Georgia win on Saturday. But as I said before, if we're all honest here, on this show, we don't give them any credit either, right? I mean, no one is ever going to say, that's it, you did it, you bested us, you're now the superior program. No one ever does that. I mean, listen, I won't even get into the specifics on this, but think about the way in which Georgia has built itself up from a recruiting standpoint. Does anybody give Georgia any credit for that, or are there always attempts to explain why it happened? Well, Georgia's blah, 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 and you can fill in the blank on that. Or, after a couple guys transfer, house of cards, all this other dumb stuff that people are always saying. This is the SEC. No fan base is going to give any other fan base any credit for anything. No one's ever going to say, hey, you guys are doing something great over there. That's just, over the course of the long haul, in large numbers, it's just not going to happen. So if Georgia was playing in a 100,000-seat stadium on Saturday, with 100,000 people there, if Nick Saban were coaching, if it was if it was everything the way we've come to expect from college football, if Georgia won, it'd still be you beat us in October, but you ain't gonna beat us in December. Or it'd be something different. It'd be something different. Georgia fans en masse have to decide we don't care what these simps in Tuscaloosa think. We don't care. You just have to decide that for yourself because they are not ever going to give you credit for anything. Jacob O'Neill says, when we find out the results from Alabama's team testing, this is one of those things where no news is good news. You know, if something really bad happens, you'll hear about that. If everything is fine, then you'll just be very kind of quiet as kept type deal. You know, obviously, you know, we'll be, you know, in Tuscaloosa on Saturday, doing the best we can to sort of look to see who might not be there. Any kind of Dwayne Dyer, like my simp Bama fan voice. Paige Cooksey liked it as well. I'm glad y'all enjoyed that. Every now and then you get a voice from me. But yeah, so this is one of those things when it comes to like coronavirus tests and things like that, no news is kind of good news. All right, y'all are having a good time over here. I love to see that. Let me go to YouTube just for a second, and then we got to get ready to go in just a minute. String Gene on the subject of Zamir White. Zoo says he's known. Yeah, this Georgia running game on Saturday is going to be a big part of this because, I mean, obviously, one of the things you expect is Najee Harris is a load to stop. He's a load to deal with. And so not only is Georgia's attempt to limit the Alabama rushing game with Harris and Brian Robinson, you know, critical in this game, but Georgia's ability to maintain its own rushing success also really matters too. And look, I know there are a lot of people who think they now want to see less of Zamir because of the way that he played against Tennessee. He needs to play better than he played on Saturday. But I'm just going to be really slow to change my mind on a lot of this kind of stuff. I want to see opportunities for Kenny McIntosh. I want to see opportunities for Kendall Milton, but I'm not ready yet to see less of either Zamir White or James Cook. I think this may be a little bit of a rotation right now, and a couple of, you know, guys may emerge as the top tandem eventually, but I still have a lot of stock bought in both these veterans. Cook, who's going to return on Saturday, Zamir White, who, if I had to assume, probably plays better this week than he played last week. That's my guess on that. Bulldog Trucker, though, predicts James Cook and Kenny McIntosh to have the big games. Thomas Van Santa says we'll see Kendall Milton play well. These are obviously games like this. The reason why Kendall came to Georgia, he wanted to play in the SEC for these kinds of games, and it is still a big game. Wyatt Fielding, this is a good point. He says, I watched the Saban press conference. He seems good. Alabama's going to be focused and prepared. We have to bring our A game either way. That's exactly right. This is still a very losable game for Georgia. Georgia will still be a point spread underdog in all likelihood when the game kicks off. That'd be a huge swing to think otherwise. So, yeah, it's still a very tough game for Georgia to try to win, for sure. James Dyke says TV angles could help Saban make calls. Here's the one thing to remember about the TV. So when I'm in the press box, I watch a play happen, and something crazy happens. You're not sure what it is. I can always turn around behind me and then watch the TV play in real time after the regular play occurred. So the one thing to keep in mind about Saban watching the game from home, unless he has some sort of special closed circuit developed for him, he's watching the game at least 30 seconds behind the action. Anyone watching on TV is actually 30 seconds behind. It's one of the reasons why it's so hard to sync up the radio call with the TV call. It's just really hard to do that because TV, because of all the satellites it goes through, and I think even the DVR slows it down in terms of how the feed is processed. All of that just makes a huge delay for what you see on your screen. So Saban, let's just think out loud for a moment. Let's say Saban wanted to get involved from home, even though the rules prohibit that happening. He'd have to use something else other than the TV feed to have any kind of real-time conversation because his TV feed is going to be behind. I said earlier in the show, I believe any contact with Saban to someone in the game environment, and in the NCAA it's defined as 90 minutes before the game until 90 minutes after the game. Any kind of contact with anyone, you know, in the booth, on the sideline, I would say that's akin to cheating. So it's not the game real-time reaction that we use to his advantage, but things that get shown on the sideline. A Georgia coach gets shown, a signal, something along those lines. The ability to process that information outside the controlled, hectic environment of a sideline or a coaching booth, I think it would just be easier to interpret that information, especially if you have analysts who can help you. As I said before, as dumb as the analogy sounds, You can't use a cell phone as a blackjack table. I don't think you should be able to have any kind of communications hookup to somebody outside the coaching environment. Bulldog Trucker says, put him in the box with no contact other than radio and needs to take credit for this L with no excuses. Listen, on Monday's show, if and when Georgia wins, our proclamation is going to be that that Nick Saban has lost to a former assistant. So, we will declare victory and we will move on. If Alabama loses on Saturday, Nick Saban has lost to a former assistant. I don't care if he's sitting, in Bryant-Denny Stadium, or if he's sitting in his lake house in Lake Burton, or if he's sitting in one of those apartments across the street from Tuscaloosa, from Bryant-Denny Stadium. Wherever Saban is sitting, he can be like the rest of, the Bama fans and watch this happen on TV. Saban will have lost a game to a former assistant. That is absolutely what we're declaring. We are absolutely moving forward if that's the case, because why would we not? So yeah. All right, a couple more. We're going to really get going. Silent Chaos says, my mic's not loud enough. Is that right? How could that possibly be? I feel like I'm screaming. All right, a couple more. We got to get ready to go. Randy Hall says, where will I be on Saturday? I will be in the press box there at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Maybe I should have a hazmat suit on now. Sounds like some people may have come in contact with that stadium who've caught the virus, but I will be there. John Beecham says, why can't Saban be in a press box by himself and be the same as any other coach who coaches from the box? I think that if I had to assume here, I think it's because they want to make sure to be taking the virus especially serious. This isn't Hugh Freeze coaching last year from the coaching box in a hospital bed, or I think there's like the one, wasn't there the one high school coach who was up in like a big crow's nest type scissor lift or something like that. I think that Alabama wants to be seen as taking this very seriously, so I don't think they want to even risk the idea that Saban comes in contact with anyone. So I think by rule he probably could be in a coach's box, but because of the coronavirus he has to be more let's say he had a toothache. He had a toothache, he couldn't be on the sideline. He could be in a coach's box for that, but toothaches aren't contagious. The coronavirus is, and so that's why he can't be at the stadium. I believe, anyway. Miriam Martin Corbin says, this is Saban's team. If we beat them, we beat them. I think that's exactly right. Jacob O'Neill checking out. Roro Maruthi on Facebook also turning the table saying, if Georgia loses, Saban didn't beat us. Well, there you go. Clay Dyke says it's still their players. That's exactly right. Dwayne Dyer says I'm going to be in a bubble. Listen, I have done very well in these games. Not to brag on myself too much. I have been masked up the entire time. Some of the other folks maybe not quite showing as much mask discipline as I've shown. I'm just going to leave it at that. I have been very, very mask conscious, because normally I wear a mask a few minutes at a time. In the room where I'm in right now, there's a wall protecting me from Connor Riley, who's here today. And so therefore, obviously, I'm not wearing a mask during the broadcast. I'm the only one in this room. But if I go in the other room, I put my mask on, but I only do that for a couple of minutes at a time. When I walk out of the building here, I put my mask on to do that. When I get back outside, I take it back off. That's pretty much what I think everybody does, I would imagine. So I haven't really worn masks for hours at a time. My job just doesn't really require that. But in game environments, I've had to wear a mask the entire time. And you know what? Pretty well. I'm pretty happy so far. Barry Watkins says, if I'm Sarkisian, I turn my phone off. Yeah, that's the other thing. Is maybe if Saban's trying to reach him via Zoom, maybe Sarkisian just pushes the mute button and moves on there. Maybe that's the case. All right, we've really got to go. That's a good question. John William Adams says, who would replace Kirby? If I had to guess, I think it's probably Lanning because he's got more tenure. For those of you that watch Succession on HBO, if you've ever seen that show, there's a part of this that also kind of reminds me of the infighting among the Alabama assistants to be the guy that, gets to be the Kendall Roy here and gets to sort of stand, next in line behind Nick Saban. I can only imagine how cutthroat that must be. It's like an episode of Game of Thrones to mix, highbrow drama metaphors. Barry Watkins says, bring plenty of dog sanitizer. Yeah, I like hand sanitizer anyway. I'm one of those guys that, I've never turned down a little squirt of hand sanitizer. John Dudick says, just don't pull a Jeremy Pruitt. Yeah, with the big, whatever that was on Saturday. I won't even say what that kind of looked like. Brian K. Whitehead mocking me for saying we've really got to go. Today we really do. Anything else? Ooh, James McKinney mentions Dale McGee. That's a pretty good idea. Steve Bond also mentions Matt Luke. That's a good thing about Georgia. And this is one of the things why, quiet as kept. If you're Alabama, you got to be really careful about this. This is a program that at one point in time could have turned to Kirby Smart or Jeremy Pruitt as its interim coach. This is an Alabama team that has had like a revolving door of assistants the last couple of years. This program is not on as firm a footing as it used to be. If you want to just keep this to the boundaries of football for a moment, navigating an issue like this with a lot less proven assistants than before, not as easy as it once was. I just heard a laundry list of potential Georgia interims if it were called upon. I hope it never does. But a lot of you are mentioning guys who've been head coaches before. It would seem right now when it comes to the solid nature of the assistants, Georgia's just in a better position in that right now. So that's good stuff. Back to YouTube one time, then we got to go. G. Grace weighing in. I wonder what G. Grace has been saying today. I should have seen more of his comments. But I am looking forward to the game, G, and I always appreciate your comments here. Rob Dog says maybe Scott Cochran knows all the signals. I wonder if it is a little easier for Scott Cochran to get some intel without Saban there to disguise the pitches on Saturday. Frank Patterson likes the fact that I said Simps a little earlier. All right, we got to go. All right, thank you so much. R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Check him out online, rsandrews.com, ajc.com. Ugly night for the Braves last night, but you can still get your Atlanta news now at ajc.com, including early voting in Georgia as that continues to go on. Follow all of that online. Atlanta news now at ajc.com. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.